Thank you for having me. This started out as sort of an interesting topic of discussion. This goes way back to Jack K4OTB, me talking on Route 65, my coming home from work one day, and just thinking about what could we do other than 2-meter FM in this group that would gain you more distance but have something available at home that you might be able to use to get on 6 meters, for example, on sideband. But what I'm going to cover today is pretty broad, so I've got a lot of material here to try to get people excited about 6 meters and up sideband. There's more than FM up there. A lot of hams, when you start out new, you're real proud of your HT, and you can get into the repeater and life's good. But really, there's so much more in your privileges up there. So I'm going to cover a little bit of the bands and the operating privileges everybody has. Once you have your technician license, or general license, you're good as gold to get up there on your technician, I believe, too, for 30 megs and up. So I'm going to give you a little background on my antenna farms that I've had over the decades and how I got involved with it. And then I have examples of how to operate in and out of HOAs. So I lived in Franklin here with an HOA, and I couldn't have a tower, and I was in withdrawal, and a lot of guys know me, and I was a junkie, and I figured it out. And it's tough, but you can do it. So also I'll cover a little bit about activities that go on up there. You know, a lot of people know 6 meters as the magic band. You know, it opens up and it closes down, and there's a little more science than that there. So you don't have to necessarily, wait for an opening. Openings occur on contests and other days, and they're man-made. What kind of antennas and equipment are required? So I'm going to cover that. What do you have? What do you need? A little bit about commercial versus homebrew. I'm going to cover coax and connectors. I brought some samples here for those who have never seen some of the end connectors and what hardline is, etc. I'm going to cover working with HOA challenges. It's not impossible. There are ways to play the game, as many of us know. A little bit about portable and mobile operation. And what was interesting, anybody get their QST? But I thought I brought mine. Maybe I did, maybe I didn't. But there was on the front cover QST a great portable picture, and it talked about VHF, UHF portable operations. So, take a look at that. That's an example of a guy out in the field on a hilltop. It's really very simple, and I brought a demo antenna in here to show how it can be done. Working DX. Yes, you can work DX on 6 meters and sometimes on 2 meters on sideband. Dare you to try it on FM, but you can work it on sideband. And then I'm going to, talk about next steps. Where do you find help? Who can help you in the group here, etc. So feel free to ask questions if you have them during this, because I'm going to cover a lot of ground, and I've been assured that all of this will be online on the WCARE site afterwards. So how did I get drafted to do this? I'm blaming it all on Laura. During the COVID crisis, I don't know if Laura's on, but during the COVID crisis, we had those 2-meter nets, remember, at 11 a.m. on Tuesdays. And it surfaced one day when I was talking with her that I was going to be moving out of Franklin and getting back into it. So I don't know if she's on or not. Yeah. Hi, Laura. You're guilty. I said I'd name you. Do you want to talk about how you drafted me for this? She's on mute. No comment. Okay. Peanut gallery silent. Anyway, she talked to me about speaking about it to the group. And it started with 6 meters. And then she teed it up to Ed. And he asked me to expand it beyond 6 meters and take it up in frequency. So there's a ton of material out there. You can get into, there's just tons of stuff. So I'm going to just try to provide an overview and some of my experiences so you don't have to boil the ocean. And then WCARES has great members here, as a lot of you know, and we've all dabbled in different modes, and there's a bunch of us who have dipped our toe in the water here. So if you have questions, we'll try to help you. So there is more than FM up there. It's the easiest way to get started, but if you look at your allocation, you have full permissions. That means not just sideband, but you can do digital modes up there. And I tell you, when 6 meters is not even open, FT8's rocking out there. And I'll go deeper into that in a little bit. It's a whole nother world on distance what sideband has. So if you think, well, I don't know if I can do that. Well, you can. Most HF rigs you buy today have 6 meters in it as standard and as a standard feature, and you can just easily switch to that. And if you want to test how your antennas work, join us on a Tuesday morning if you can get there, And we, at 9:30 we switched to 6 meters, and we'd be more than happy to help shake down your antennas. But think about it, and we invite you to come up and play with us. So this is a little bit of an eye chart, and I've blown it up, but most of you should be familiar with your band charts, but maybe don't look up to these frequencies really all that much. But as you can see, there's 6 meters, 2 meters. I'll dip my toe in 220. I do operate on 220, and then there's also 70 centimeters. And as you can see on the chart, those are the calling frequencies, no different than you would on, 17 meters. Everybody knows 18150 is the calling frequency on 17, and then you move off after you make your contact. Same principle applies here. That's 6 meters on the 50.125, 144, 200, 222, 200, and 432, 100. So that's all the way up to 70 centimeters or 440 frequencies. So some background on me. I've been licensed since 1977, so 40 some years in the hobby, 45 almost. Gosh, time flies. I utilize most bands from 160 to 70, so I have all antennas up on those frequencies again after moving out of my HOA. So I'm back in business, but I've operated from dorm rooms when I was in college. I have done apartment dwelling ham radio, loops around the spare bedroom. My wife, one of those things, when we got married, she knew I was already a ham operator, so I was grandfathered, so she puts up with it. I have operated under HOAs, and I've operated under no restrictions, which is a beautiful thing. So my encouragement here is don't let an HOA stop you. There is a way to operate. There is a way to get on 6 meters, and I'll show you how. And I'll share some of my antenna setups. So don't let the limitations inhibit your possibilities. It's just, there's some basics to cover, no different than you learned on your license exam to make a simple dipole. Same thing. You're not doing anything different, except they're going to get smaller. Really nice. And for those of you who've been around a long time, there was a guy by the name of Wayne Green, and I live by his motto. His magazine went out of business in the 80s, but he had an editorial column which was fantastic called Never Say Die. That's my motto on antennas. No one tells me I can't have an antenna up. Nobody. I will find a way. And I'll show you some pictures of my attic in Franklin, and you'll go, holy cow. So let's talk about Franklin. I had beams. I had all kinds of stuff out there. So as you can see here, there's some pictures of my attic. And I had rotators up there because before I was transferred down to Middle Tennessee, I had 5 towers. So I had rotators coming out of the eyeballs. So I put them up in the attic. But what's really neat is that depending upon how your attic framing is done, mine was pretty open, meaning I didn't have, every 4 feet another set of joint where it's blocking, and I could do some rotation work with the smaller antennas. So I was running FM and sideband beams, short ones, in my attic. And at one point, RJ will remember, I actually put 5 elements up of my 6 meter beam pointed due south. I could work backwards into Franklin, but I was after, man, I want that tropo stuff down over the Gulf. As you can see here, you can see different antennas, but that's what I had. And what's really cool about your attic, there's no wind load. You can put up whatever you want. It's not going to blow over in the next storm. So tack into this, the framing up top, the wood's there. What the hell? You got free supports for holding the ends of your wires and strings. So, it's really important to think about your attic. But that's part of my setup here. You can see the 2 meter sideband, and there's my 220 up top. And my first 6 meter antenna is that one on the bottom. It's a dipole. I just use a balun, and boom, I was on the air. Plus, I use my 40 meter. And we'll go into that a little bit more. But you can load your 40 meter dipole in your attic to operate on 6. When I lived up in Mundelein, Illinois, this is my setup from 1990 to 98. My wife asked me to get the junk off the roof, and I said, well, all it takes is a tower. And I bought my first tower, and up it went. So it looks a little busy, and it is not spec. If you read all the guys who put up antennas, there's certain distances and stuff, and it's like, well, if you climb towers and you realize you only get one, you'll jam all you can on there, and I'll worry about the pattern later. But I started out in sideband in both 2 meter, 440, and then I did some satellite work, and you can see my array that goes up and down. I did satellite work for about 8 years, and enjoyed it. And then AO40 blew up, and there was no more deep space. Really, AO27 was the only other one, and AO13 was coming and going, and sort of the fun fell out of it, because when you operate sideband, unlike FM satellite, you're in low Earth orbit, so you get about 5 minutes or whatever, maybe 15 if you're lucky, with a horizon to horizon. When you do sideband and you have the deep space ham satellites, they're going out over 7,000 miles away from the Earth, so you can literally get half the hemisphere. So I was talking to Argentina, Australia, no problem. You just had it, where was the satellite positioned in its orbit? So I've been reading that they're going to launch and try to launch more deep space satellites again to have that kind of sideband distance, because we currently don't have that. Everything is low Earth orbit. So when you get the longer distance, to me it made it more fun to be able to have a rag chew with a guy in South Africa or Argentina for 15 minutes. A little more fun tuning it, you have the Doppler shift, but it's still a lot of fun because I can point the antenna when it's way out in its orbit and I don't have to move it. You just hang in there while the satellite comes out and comes back. So there's a lot of fun you can have up there other than FM. So think about that as you look in the future, and keep an eye on the ARRL site, because they'll have more information on what AMSAT's up to. I then shifted, after I got out of the satellite, I said, well, we're going to get into 6 meters. So I basically, the major difference here is I got used to standoffs. I have a vertical there, but as you can see, there's a 5-element 6-meter Cushcraft beam. So I basically swapped out the satellite array and said, I'm going to go chase 6 meters, and had a blast. It's just the great band, and especially during the summer months, it's really open more frequently than in the winter, but it can open at any time. And now here I am in Las Casas after I moved out of Franklin, and I have that tower from Mundelein back up, and that's all I've been working on this summer was getting this antenna back and tower back into business. And I recycled all my antennas, except now I have a 7-element beam for here on 6 meters. That's the lower one. And here I can use my mouse maybe to let me show. Yeah, so up here is my 2-meter sideband. I have a little 5-element interlaced Cushcraft. That's a 2-meter 440. So you have both antennas. It's basically offset on the center boom. And then below that I have a 440 antenna beam, and then this is my 6-meter. And then I have a 220 and a 220 vertical, and I'll be adding this antenna here shortly when I redo the base mount that I used to have in my attic. So what kind of activities go on up there? You've got, in sideband, you can do terrestrial type communication point to point. You have E-skip off the E layer. You have ducting that can happen along frontal boundaries. You have aurora. Think about this, aurora. That's a real picture from my front yard that I took one aurora storm. You have satellite. You can have, just standard sideband opening. So, I mean, there's just all kinds of stuff. But I will mention a lot of CW up there if you're a CW fanatic. And there's a lot of digital. FT8, FT4 is happening up there. And during the contests, it lights up. And during band openings. The other night, if anybody was paying attention, I'll give you more information on this in the presentation. There was an auroral opening they called it K6 level. So that means it was theoretically visible to southern Illinois. I got on and I did work a couple of guys on FT8 up into Wisconsin. So you go, that was on 6 meters. But I did shout out on sideband too, just to see if anybody was awake. So it's one of those things when it really opens up, you can have reflection off the auroral cloud up there. Think about it. And you can bounce off that. And I have done that. One time I ran it with my 1kW, 1.2 with the Heathkit. I've got an SB220 converted. And I was able to work out in Wyoming, southern Canada, out toward the Pacific Northwest. You basically bounce off the auroral cloud. It garbles your audio a little bit, but it is receivable. And for guys in CW, they're having a field day. So you pay attention to those kind of openings too. So I watch for auroral openings. But you also take a look at the weather forecast. So this is the same stuff we use for WCARES. If you look at the National Weather Service site, I'm going to use this as an example because this is a certain date and time to show you what's going on. This is the National Weather Service map that a lot of you access when the weather's going south and you want to look at the forecast for the day. One of the neat things about band openings on sideband for 2 meters and for 6 meters is you can heavily on 2 meters, you can get some openings along the frontal boundaries. So it's a form of ducting that goes on, that happens, and it's usually south of a major front line. Question?
Ron has a question about if you had any experience with meteor scatter.
No, I have not. That's in the queue, but when the band's open, I'm busy working. I'm not going to play. But there is a lot of guys who work meteor scatter. It's mostly CW operators. Anybody that's paid attention, there's this guy Hepburn, and Carl out there knows all about Hepburn, as does Laura. And this is the same chart that Hepburn has out there for tropo openings. And basically, the tropo forecast on that date aligned with the National Weather Service chart. So if I go back and go page up for a moment, take a look at where the severe forecast is for the thunderstorms, and you can see the frontal boundary. Take a look to the south of that, and you can see the frontal boundary here in the middle section. That's where the boundary is at. And these darker areas, this color coding, is where you have very intense openings. So these are potential paths for your signal and where you can get bouncing going on. You'll also watch for what I call subtropical and tropical paths. The neat thing about Middle Tennessee is we're within striking distance of hitting the Gulf of Mexico openings to South America. So you can work along coastal openings, and you'll see them at different times a year. In the wintertime, not so much, but in the summertime, lots of activity. And you'll be working down into the Caribbean on 6 meters. You don't think twice about working into Puerto Rico or down to Barbados. You can get down into Colombia easy. So it's one of those things, you don't need much to get on and hop around on sideband. But this is important to watch the weather, and I put the link in for here too as reference, but just look up Hepburn tropospheric chart and they'll go right there. And he updates it every day, and he has usually a forecast out there. Now what's interesting is in the middle of winter, as I said, it's sort of dead. And I laid this out here just for grins and giggles. I operated just for a couple hours in the VHF UHF contest on January 15th. And these are some of the directions I had on 6 meters and where I worked. Now the Hepburn forecast shows, well, there should be no tropospheric openings, but it doesn't mean the band's not open. And when the contests are on, the hams are on, we ionize our own paths. When it started out in the beginning, you're looking for little bitty openings. That's what I call 6 meters the magic band. When I first got on, I worked a guy out in Memphis, so 173 miles. We worked each other, and he says, yeah, I'm not hearing much yet. Within the hour, there was an opening, and then I started opening up into Texas and down into southern Louisiana, and it was all of a sudden, boom, all kinds of stations. I was giving away my grid square to guys down south who didn't have it. So we had an opening, and everybody's exchanging, and it's a lot of fun. So even though the band may be dead for tropo, doesn't mean the band is dead. Hope that helps. Here are some of the tracking sites for solar stuff. Spaceweather.com is a great one. You can get daily updates there, and if you feel like paying a couple of bucks, you can get text to your phone. There's a Space Weather Prediction Center from the federal government, and they have select space weather forecasts. Another one I spy on that sort of gives me a great graphic is the University of Alaska Geophysical Institute. And theirs gives you graphics from the polar perspective and in North America to let you see the projected boundaries of where the auroral cloud is at. And then DX Maps. I don't know if many of you have played with DX Maps. Really neat site. And I'll show you a couple of graphics of these. This is the auroral forecast site from up in Alaska. And you can select different rings. The default is you look, of course, at Alaska. It's the center of their universe. This is the auroral cloud range. They give you a forecast on what they call a KP index, which is very similar to our K index. And when the numbers go higher, the auroral cloud creeps south. So it's just simple. And if it gets to between 7 and 9, if you ever hear, oh man, the K index is like 9 or whatever, we might be able to see the aurora here. That's how far down it may be. And All I do is then select the North America graphic, and that allows me to see how far down the boundaries are, both of where you can optically see it if it is visible and it's dark enough, or where the cloud is for potential skip. This is dxmaps.com. Really cool site. They have, you got to join in order to input your data, but there are a lot of guys spotting up here. And as you can see in this graphic, there's openings here from down in the Caribbean, down into South America. On this date, I did the snapshot. The purpose of me showing this to you is it's a great freebie to go out and look, and they have all the different bands where people are spotting stuff, including European bands we're not allowed on, like 40 megahertz. But here's the 6 meter side. You can look up 10 meter openings. You can see what's going on 2 meters, and if anybody's reporting 440. And you can zoom in to different parts of the globe. But it's one of my favorite go-to spots when I want to see, hey, is there any activity anybody's reporting? Well, here's what I call contest band openings. So 6 meters and up are magic bands. When I was on during the UHF, VHF contest back in January, I worked a lot of local guides. I met a bunch of people around Middle Tennessee who operate during those contests. And just throw your shout out on the calling frequency, you'd be surprised who comes back. But the neat thing is, no matter what the band conditions, those operators will be out there that are really into this, both at the time the contest starts and usually the first Saturday evening, you'll find a lot of guys making it a go. So they're out there no matter what the band conditions, listening for the openings that happen, like what I just explained to you on my opening down in Texas and Louisiana. So there are some super stations out there, and then there are rovers, and we'll cover those guys too. But rovers, as you saw on the cover of QST, they're out there in their mobiles going to hilltops and stuff trying to work folks. And the whole name of the game in the VHF, UHF contest are grid squares. Count your grid squares. And these guys tend to drive to rarer grid squares that are hard to get, where somebody that's not usually a resident there that's a ham. So there's a lot of large club groups out there, especially in the summer one. So when are those contests? Here's sort of a schedule for 2022. The January one went by, but there's one in June, 2 weeks before field day. Easy to operate from home. There's one in September. There's a CQ Worldwide VHF contest, and that's really more leaning towards 6 meters, but you'll see a lot of guys working that. And then there's these sprints, which are really cool. Great way to test your antennas. On April 24th, there's one, and they last 4 to 6 hours. And it's one of these things. It could be 2 meters only. It's base stations and rovers, other sprints. And there's a contest calendar that I put here as a link that will show you all the different sprints. But they're usually afternoon to evening, depending on which group it is, for 4 to 6 hours. So you're not sucking up a whole weekend like you would be on the CQ Worldwide or something. And here's some more of the sprints. You can see they have them, and they're usually individual bands. So the sprints, this one's sponsored by the Southeastern VHF Society. They're 4 hours. So like the 50 megahertz, typically late August, from 7 to 11 p.m. Then you can see 2 meter, 220, 432. So they keep everybody focused. One band only. We're out there for a couple hours. You're not losing lots of time, and you can make contests, see how your antennas are working. And if you want to make a lot of contests, and turn in your score. Okay, what type of equipment and antennas? Well, what do you have? Let's start there. If you only have an HF rig and you have 6 meters, you can play. Nobody's saying you can't. 6 meter sideband is there. It's set on your radio. You just got to tune to the frequency. For 2 meter, 220, 440 sideband, you'll need a rig with those options like the ICOM 9700 or a transverter. When I first started out in sideband, I was using a Kenwood TS520 with an outboard transverter. I'm dating myself. But I picked up the rig, used, and the transverter I picked up, and I was on 2 meter sideband having a blast. So there are ways that if your radio doesn't have the upper VHF and UHF frequencies, that transverters are available from Down East Microwave or Q5 or Elecraft even has them. I know there's a lot of guys who have Elecraft equipment here. They have transverters that take you up there to play on sideband. So I've shown some pictures of them there, and not that I said they were cheap, but they are available out there. And older transverters are out there for, older Kenwoods and stuff. So I have a 2-meter sideband one still sitting at home that I haven't used in decades, but I still have it. So they're out there. You see them at flea markets and stuff. People don't know what they're for, can't figure out how to hook them up, or it's really easy. Encourage you to go onto the Down East Microwave site and take a look-see on how simple it is. They have some great information up there and on Q5. Antennas, commercial versus homebrew. You saw in my attic in Franklin or on my towers, a lot of commercial gear from Cushcraft that I've used, and M Squared. You can use anybody's brand, whatever floats your boat. I just tend to use antennas that I hear guys working with that are successful and said, okay, I'll try those. But, commercial's easy and quick. Hello, DX Engineering, ship it. Easy. Homebrew's cheaper though, and when starting out, keep it simple. And you saw my attic antenna. We talked about the portable ops group, so I won't beat that. But once again, for 6-meter sideband, your 40-meter antenna, if you can tune 40, you can tune 6. And homebrew something simple. They can radiate quite well. So let me give you some examples. David, are you on this morning? Maybe not. Okay, well, he contributed here for me, so I'm going to give him credit. This is his telescoping fishing rods and speaker wire, 6-meter antenna. He got on one Tuesday morning with the group, and it was amazing. It was speaker wire and fishing pole, 2 pieces. That's it. 52-mile point-to-point from my house to his house. And he was like being next door. So it doesn't take much to go a long way. And I don't think he was running the full 100 watts either. So he was using his HF rig with that little setup. Excellent emergency comm antenna. So it's still your basic principle. 468 divided frequency in megahertz. There you go. Boom. You are now on the air. Or use your existing antenna. Another one that I brought here is a 6-meter dipole using tubular aluminum and wood. Once again, there's no wind load, no weathering in your attic. So you see it here on the picture, but I brought it in physically here today. This is just leftover junk aluminum I got at a Hamfest that I put together, and I use a couple of car hose clamps, and there's a little PVC pipe for insulation. I do a split on the feed point, and the neat thing about this arrangement, to show everybody, is that you can use these hose clamps to extend and tune it. So I have brought along my MFJ, anybody wants to see later, tuner, that this thing goes flat for like 1.5 megs on 6 meters. It's beautiful. And if I decide that I want to be out in the yard and do something portable up on a hill and get on 2-meter sideband, I just loosen this clamp, slide these 2 pipes in, and now I'm on 2-meter sideband. That's all it took. And then I just screwed this stuff into my cross beam in the attic in Franklin. Piece of cake, you're on the air. Doesn't take much at all. So, be creative with what you have in your junk shop and see what you can come up with. But like I said, this aluminum, you find this all over the place at Hamfest, whether you're at, going down to Huntsville or go up to Lebanon. Questions on antennas. This is the fun part to me. I love playing with antennas. It's easy and simple to do. So I even give you some dimensions here to make life easy for you. So if you want to get on 6 meters, all you need is 9 foot 3 inches. If you want to do 2 meters, it's 3.25. There's 70 centimeters. And simple beams can be used. You see at the ARRL education sessions how they use the tape measures, and we're going to do RDFing with 3-element little beams. We've done that here. All you have to do is go horizontal with it. Instead of vertical, go horizontal. And it makes a difference. But you can also turn these small beams with inexpensive TV rotors. When I first started dabbling with this, you see them at Home Depot for like $100 or whatever, the little TV rotors. They don't have brakes on them like the bigger ham rotors, but if you're not having much wind load, you don't have to worry about it. But those will turn it real cheap in the attic, 4-wire conductor, and you're in business. So that's how I backed into turning these low weight antennas, is with a simple TV rotor. And then I learned as I got bigger I had to have brakes or the wind would turn them. Coax, okay, critical component. Line losses can absorb signals at these high frequencies. I can't but stress this. I'm going to give you some examples. When you have those losses in your coax, they can leave you not hearing anything and you're wondering what's wrong. It's because your coax is sucking up all the RF and it's not getting to your radio. So for local comms like here on ARES on 6 meters, your HF coax will typically work okay on 6, some. And when we look at 6 meters and WCARES, it's the whole thing about point-to-point communication within the county. However, if you want to get farther out, that may make a difference. If you're, trying to use inexpensive RG58 or something, you won't get any RF down the pipe. You need to invest a little bit more in a little higher quality cable if you want to go 2 meters and up. So this is a bit of an eye chart, but this is an attenuation table that I picked up off online. And you can see all the typical coaxes that are available for us in the ham radio hobby. A lot of us default to RG8X, RG59 or LMR 200 or RG8 or RG213 and RG8U. And if you go to the right and you see the frequency table, I put them in boxes here. You can see the loss per 100 feet, 2.7 dB. Oh my gosh, at 2 meters, it's 4.5 and 8.2 at 440. So next thing you know, there's no signal reaching your radio from the antenna. And as you even take the typical RG8, once you get up to 2 meters, it starts to fall off fast, 2.4 and 4.5 dB. So when you think about VHF and UHF, be thinking the LMR 400, 600, 1200 types. And you can see that, of course, the more you pay, the less loss there is. But at the end of the day, it's important because it's all about hearing. If you only care about hearing the repeater, don't sweat it. But if you want to work people farther away and really hear them and get your RF out of your antenna, a better cable is a way to go. So that's step number one. Have the right cable for the application. Because as much as, and I learned this the hard way, I tried doing it with, RG8 and everything, and I'm wondering, why in the hell am I not hearing anything? Well, not hearing well, and it's because you're losing signal down your coax. And if you're running distances beyond 25 feet, oh yeah, it starts to have an impact. Also, there's hardline. I brought a couple samples here today. It's extremely low loss. They come in 1/2 inch or 7/8 inch diameter. Typically, it's microwave uses. This is a lot of hams buy it used, although there are some guys who will pay the price and buy it new. Jack was kind enough to get me in touch with a ham in Nashville who had gotten a whole pile of this stuff from a microwave tower where they were changing out the coax and updating it. This stuff was from the late 60s, early 70s. But guess what? It's copper. And if it didn't leak, it's in good shape. And I don't need to have the gas in the center and all that stuff. This is, this is ham use. We're cheap. So find another way. So, I rented a trailer, went down there, picked it up, and I have now applied this cable. And I also had some for VHF, UHF before. But used hardline can be found cheaply. They kill you on the connectors. And I'll show you some connectors. It's expensive, and thanks to Doug, he put me in touch with a guy who had the older connectors that I was able to find out east, and saved the day. And now I've got it I'm using it on a 40 meter antenna. I'm out almost 450 feet of that hard line, and the SWR is flat. It's a beautiful thing, and I don't lose any signal, and it's a great antenna. But up on the VHF, UHF, a lot of guys run short lengths of hardline, and I am running hardline on my tower. So this is some example of how I transition from the tower into the house. So I've got 3 pictures here just to give you an idea, because I got to stress, you're putting stuff up in the air, surge protection, surge protection, surge protection, surge protection, electrical system, and on your coax lines, or unplug. This house, I've been able to do it 100% the right way, I think, where I've sort of cut corners before and had surge protectors at the bottom of my verticals or at the bottom of the tower. This is a little aside from my tower, but you can see here how I'm transitioning from my hard line into LMR 600 or LMR 400, depending upon what I'm doing. It's all weatherproofed. And then these boxes are DX Engineering boxes, and inside there those are all individual surge protectors on each coax feed line coming down the tower or up in my field in the case of the second box. So it's important, use the right cable, surge protect it, and then use the right connectors. So let's talk about connectors, because that's really important. Everybody knows about the standard UHF connector. You've all soldered these PL259s to beat the band probably by now. But really, when you start getting up into 2 meters and even on 6, you might want to really transition to end connectors. They're a little more fun to solder, not too bad, but they really are much more frequency aligned to not lose the RF signal as you do on a PL259, which is used for HF. And then for hardline, here's a 7/8 inch connector, and they're a little pricey, but once again, this is what I had to buy to use that cable I saw, but the losses go way down. So depending upon what you're willing to invest in, you can really step up the game. But it's important that even if you're using LMR 400, use the right connectors. Because as you can see here, this is the loss based on frequency. And the loss between a UHF and an end connector is 1.5 dB per connector. So do the math. Connector up at the antenna, connector at my surge protector, connector on the other side of the surge protector. I have a connector up my patch bay, and then I have a connector that goes to the radio. Wonder where my RF is going. So I'm not going to get into the complexities, but the right connector for the right application is what I'm trying to stress here. End connectors, you find it all at Hamfest. They got them out there. They were up in Lebanon. The dealer had them there inside the building last June. They're down in Huntsville. They're easy to get. DX Engineering has them. But use the right connector for the right application. So when you think about your 2 meters even at home, and you've put up a 2 meter vertical, you can get adapters that go to PL259 bases, but you'll see a lot of the bigger radios that are out there like the ICOM, they come with the end connector output on the back for a reason, and that is to help you not lose signal. So big important takeaway, use the right connector for the right application. There's some pictures for those of you online between a end connector, the PL259 male, and then there's the 7/8 inch hardline. That's a female connector. You can get them both ways. But those things are built to last because of hardline installations go up towers and they're used for microwave communications. Another little add-in people don't think about much is a preamp. Now on your standard HF radio today, if you have an ICOM 7300 or a Kenwood or Yaesu rig, there's a preamp switch. And what that's doing is at the radio, increasing the amplification of the incoming signal so you can hear it better. But when you do it at the radio, you're also increasing the noise you received from out in the ether and down your coax line. So basically in VHF, UHF, you're turning on more noise than signal at the radio. So what is recommended is that you use preamps. And for those of you who dabbled in satellite, and I don't know if you're using those RJ or not, a preamp at your satellite antenna is the way to go. No different than if you think about basic TV. When you think about, you live out in the sticks and you put up an old VHF antenna years ago, you would put a mass mount preamp there to push the signal down so you get more at the TV. Same principle applies here. And these are some of the examples out there. Mirage and SSB Communications have preamps. A lot of hams use them. I have the Mirage. And basically what you do is you mount it at the antenna end. So after I would come off my beam on that tower, I have a flexible LMR 400 that swings around for the rotator. At that point, you put in the preamp. And that thing then amplifies more signal than noise down to your radio. They work great. And as you can see here, you can get anywhere from 15 to 25 dB of gain up there. And all of a sudden you're hearing people you didn't hear. It's really very helpful. So once again, it's a boost. It's an investment like all things in this hobby. This hobby is a black hole like your fishing boat. So you can throw money in the water, you can throw money in your radio, so whichever. But once again, important to think about mass-mounted preamps if you want to get serious in sideband because most guys are using them and gals out there. Question? I use power amplifiers. Yes, sir. I'm running typically on 6 meters. I'm still building my shack, so I don't have 240 volt yet in my shack. I'm working on it. I have a 1200 watt amplifier for 6 meter sideband. For 2 meters, I'm running Mirage amplifiers, same for 440, and those are 10 in, 80 out amps with the preamp switch built in there if I want that. I ordered an ICOM 7800 or 9700 rather. I'm waiting for that to arrive. When that comes, I'm going to ditch those because it comes standard 100 watts and 75 watts. So I won't have to mess with the preamps and the delay that I have. I use an old satellite rig from the 90s as my primary satellite rig, and I don't bother with that anymore to be able to. I want to get away from that. That rig's it's showing its age basically. That's the best way of describing my old ICOM. But it was great for satellite work and still works for satellites if I want to. But I wanted something a little fresher. So, but you can use the Mirage amps absolutely. Just depends on your relay. There's a relay delay sometimes that started bothering me of late. So working with HOAs, your attic is your best friend. Unless you have a foil covered 4x8 sheets above you, your attic is your free antenna mount. Use it. Signals travel halfway decently through plywood roofing. Don't be disappointed. Any antenna in your attic has no wind load, so you can put it up very simply. Some of them I've used, I go to Home Depot, I buy a flange, metal flange with a pipe that's like 1 1/4 or 1.5 inch. I take a board, put it across the joists, screw that in, there's my mast. I'm in business and I can mount a rotor or put the antenna physically on there or my verticals. I had them all over my house. I had 12 antennas in my attic in Franklin. It was nuts. Luckily, my wife never climbed up there to look. Be careful. Yeah, go ahead. I found an opening behind a wall. My shack was on the 2nd floor, and there was an opening I found behind the wall. The eave came down like this, and I made sure that when the guy was building this place, it was already under construction. We bought it. Just put an access so I can get behind there. And then I discovered there was an opening, and I was able to go up and feed up into the attic. Big hole. And it's where they had blown insulation in. There was, but it was behind the eave over the garage. I found a hole there. Or you can drill something. In my new place, I drilled through the eave. And then I went through and then up through the floor and, into the 2nd floor.
Let me give one caveat about antennas in the attic. If you've got a security system at your house and you turn the burglar alarm on at night, sometimes when you key down, I've had it make the alarm go off, and the whole family wakes up at about 11 o'clock at night. That's not real fun.
No, I agree there. I'll give you another hazard too that I discovered at my place. I had to put all kinds of chokes on my smoke alarms on the 2nd floor. When I turned on the amplifier on 2 meter sideband and said, hello, CQ, CQ, there's my grid square, I set off all the smoke alarms in the house. So it took a little work to get the chokes right for that. So yeah, there are some hazards in your attic, don't get me wrong. Nothing's easy, of course, in ham radio, but for the most part, I didn't have my security system go off. Question, yes? When you're buying a used house, I know I blew my wife's mind. The house we lived in Franklin was like house number 4 we went and looked at. And we were in a hurry to move down here for work. I saw the foil, I said, party's over. HOA, there's foil in the attic, this house isn't gonna work, doesn't matter. She's like, are you driving me nuts? I said, well, if I can't have an antenna, I can't play my hobby, party's over. It's no good. It's gotta be good for you too. So it's one of those things, all you have to do is look up in the attic. You'll see the foil on the roof, on the inside. The whole point is to keep your attic cooler. That's the reason for the design, but it's an RF inhibitor. Yeah, the distance stuff won't work. And it causes you an SWR problem when you try to point at that foil. You're light up. The other thing that I had happen in Franklin, I had to elevate my 6-meter antenna, was a lot of the foil wrapping around your HVAC ductwork will interact as well. So I had to go higher on my pipes to back away from that reflection up. So there's little nuances in the attic, and the only thing I can encourage you on is you just got to try it. Be comfortable walking on beams. I laid boards out all over the place so I could walk safely. And the other ones, do you have trees to hide thin wire and feed line? That's the other game. I have found at Hamfest really thin, small stuff, and that works great. You can't see it. So I agree. There's ways to skin the HOA cat, but don't think you can't do it. That's it. Always try first, because even with the foil on 2 meters, usually both ends are open. You're going to point that way, and you at least get one direction out. And once again, repeaters are typically not too bad to hit, but anything where point to point is in play, then you're going to have some challenges. Portable mobile. Okay, here's crazy people. You think we're nuts. I'm doing mine on a tower, but these guys drive out to the middle of nowhere and become either portable fixed stations or these drive-around guys that are the rovers. They call it run and gunning. And the whole idea is during the contest, these guys are out in cool spots helping us get grid squares. And it's neat. They try to hit certain grid squares where they're at the corner, and they can drive from one grid square to the next grid square to the next grid square, and then you work them multiple times, and there's 4 grids. So, you catch them over the period of a couple hours, they're working all these different grid squares and getting up on a hilltop. So it really is a lot of fun. And these guys are possessed, and they love what they do. And there's no passenger seat, so to speak, during their contest. It's all full of gear and computers and stuff. It's really cool. So if you like portable operation, this is fun because the antennas are small. You're not taking big beams out, but there are guys who put 6-meter beams up out there too. Just look at the cover of QST. Another one is, what's another simple antenna? Halos. These are great. There are guys who will drive around with them on their vehicle for standard 6-meter because you want to be horizontally polarized. I can't stress that. Horizontal is the name of the game. When you're this way, you have a hard time hearing. I've experimented on 2 meters, for example. I have 13 elements on 2 meters. I pointed during the 2-meter test we had a few weeks back, and I had a hard time hearing folks because of vertical polarization versus horizontal. Heard the repeater great, but I could not hear a lot of the stations. I switched to my vertical, there it was. So on sideband, it's all about horizontal, and those little halos for 2 meters and 6 meters aren't very big, and you can homebrew them or you can buy them commercial. There are guys who put them on the side of the tower, and you're in business. So it doesn't take much to get on the magic band. Working DX, yes. When 6 meters is open, there are guys working from the Midwest to New Zealand. It's possible. You can do Europe, Africa on 6, as well as Japan. It's possible. For your CW operators, it's very possible. For FT8, it's extremely possible. And if you read QST and some of the 50 megahertz and up sections, read about what those guys are doing. You got to be in the right place at the right time. For me personally, my farthest contact across the pond is the UK on 6. I've also worked in Venezuela and Colombia, no problem. I've heard CW from Japan, but I could not get through. The pileup was something else. And the openings only last a little while. It's, this is all E-skip, but it's neat. It's a lot of fun. And I got so excited when I heard Japan. I'm like, I want a JA so bad. I really do. But I couldn't land them. So, oh well. But FT8, you can get farther in poorer conditions. SSB is possible, in the right conditions as well. But when you think the band is dead, there's a lot of FT8 going on out there. I can tell you that for a fact. And 2 meter band is also one with enhanced openings into Canada. I have worked up on 2 meters into Canada. Ontario has a ton of operators up there, and same with Quebec. And you also get out toward Calgary, especially at 6, there's no problem. So, the enhanced openings are there, and then, of course, sideband on the satellites, when you can get a sideband satellite, can get you the whole hemisphere, as I mentioned earlier. So some reference resources to start wrapping up here. Building cheap Yagis. You want to build a cheap Yagi? There's a website there that has some cheap Yagi construction for VHF, UHF. Portable operation. This guy out here in Colorado had a great, even though it's a Colorado focus, it's more the principle he's covering. That's a great site. And then you also know PSK Reporter. That's a real-time signal report from around the world on maps. It shows you your mode and frequency and what everybody else is doing on the band. So that's another great link site to have up when you're running, especially. I use it on FT8 heavily. So to wrap it up, I hope this was interesting. VHF, UHF, sideband, and other modes up there are really a lot of fun. I really enjoy it. I hope you will too. Get off the FM bug. Check out what's out there. It's really neat. You don't need a lot to get on 6-meter sideband. You probably already have it. Just erect your antenna horizontally. Can't stress that enough. Horizontal, horizontal, horizontal. Plenty of activity is going on up high. It may sound dead, but especially during contests, it lights up. And like all hobbies, the limits are up to you. What do you want to put into it? And I invite you, with Paul and John and everybody else, we have our Tuesday morning retiree go out in the field WCARES group meeting on 80 meters at 9 o'clock. And then we shift to 6 meters at 9:30 and at 10 o'clock 17 meters. And sometimes we go play at other bands, like I would appreciate the test the other morning of my new 40-meter loop. RJ, I appreciate the signal reports, and John. It was a lot of fun working everybody with a new antenna. And because we got done early, we were able to pop off to another band. We've also done it on 160, as Ron can attest. We've done some 160 tests when John and Paul decided to put up a 160 antenna out by the church. So I think there's a lot of us here who would love to get you started. And, can't but encourage you, come on up. There's a lot of fun going up there on 6 meters and 2 meters and up.